Collegium Budapest, New Europe College, Wissenschaftskolleg zu Berlin, CEU, Institute for Advanced Studies, Woodrow Wilson Center, and Indiana University. Călin has done research and published in the areas of political anthropology, history of social sciences, history of medicine and public health, sociology of the environment, and ethnicity studies. His most recent book, and the reason for our meeting tonight, is Inventing the Social in Romania. And his most recent article came out last year in Antipode and is titled, "We Should Have Asked What Year We Were in Wastelands and Wilderness in Văcărești Park." So gentlemen, welcome, and please start your conversation. The floor is yours. And by the way, thank you to you for participating to this discussion, and thank you to everybody in attendance.
Great, thanks, Julio. So I'll just briefly introduce the book. This is Călin Cotoi's Inventing the Social in Romania, 1848 to 1914, Networks and Laboratories of Knowledge. It was published by Brill in 2020, and it's a remarkable book. I enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed writing about it. Broadly speaking, it surveys a kind of variety of characters, mostly marginal, sometimes obscure figures across Romanian lands and outside Romanian lands in this period in the broader Romanian space, trying to pull together how this idea of the social emerged in Romania. And it is a rich tapestry, theoretically, methodologically. It's character-driven. If you just take a look at the table of contents, the various chapters, there's a lot of representative biography where Călin kind of plays with the macro and micro scales in this kind of history of sociology and anthropology to try to elucidate, what emerged as, this broader thing that, we call the social. And it's remarkably successful. One of the great things about the book is it works as a whole, right? It sticks to his broader question and themes that, he uses these individuals to tease out some of these questions and ideas. But, as I mentioned in my review, each chapter could be read independently and separately as a kind of essay or case study and can work on its own. So I thought it was brilliantly done, including something like a dramatis personae in the front where you can try to keep up with a lot of the characters that are in this book. And the characters are not just, these individuals, whether it's an anarchist or socialist or Marxist or a physician, a racist, a racial biologist, but they're also, microorganisms and diseases, and for cholera, for example. So it's really well done. I particularly enjoyed the chapter toward the end on exhibitions, and he's got this thing with the balloon, and it's a remarkable feat, not just intellectually, but also the way to frame a book like this that is saying so much and has such a big idea. But to bring it down to scale such that it's not only ambitious intellectually, but also very readable, right? And there's a lot going on in this book, and he does a great job of tying it all together. So I think I'd like to just maybe start, and I'll raise some topics and ask Călin some questions. The first of which, and just to give him a chance to kind of describe the book in his own terms. The major question that you set out was, how did the social emerge in Romania in the last half of the 19th century through the early part of the 20th? I wonder if you could talk a bit about the genesis of this book and what prompted this question, how you went about answering it. Take it where you will, Călin.
Okay, thank you so much. I mean, it's you've written a great review. I feel a bit ashamed, and I'm not sure that the book is as good as you're making it to be, but I hope it rises to the expectations. Well, it's a book that's In a way, it started with some kind of research I did on interwar sociology, and I've been reading and writing, especially on Anton Golopenția, but also on others, and I was never able to actually grasp how these guys were doing what they were doing. I mean, for me, it was always they always had a kind of a blind spot. It was this blind spot of nation building in a way. I was always wondering how such sophisticated individuals were doing such strange things. For example, Golopenția was involved in this population exchange things. And then I started to look on their, let's say, conceptual vocabulary. What does they mean when they talk about the social, when they talk about the nation? And in order to make sense of it, I just went back. I went back to the debates between Stere and Dobrogeanu Gherea, the debates inside the Romanian left from the beginning of the 20th century. And then I stumbled on this amazing trove of treasure, I would say, in the national archives. There are the letters of Russian anarchists stranded in Romania. And some of them are in Russian, some of them are in English, because there is one guy writing from Kansas and trying to go to Romania. He never made it, but anyhow. They are written in French, even in Bulgarian. Somebody translated them because otherwise it would have been too much for my scarce linguistic knowledge. But it was, for me, it was like, wow, there is something here. And then I just realized that these guys are connected somehow to the guys I was talking about, and that these guys are involved in this larger debate about the emergence of social expertise. What does the social mean? What are the differences between social and socialism? How does a revolutionary project adapt itself inside a nation-building society, a nation-building state that Romania was in the 1870s, 1880s? And I started to look at these individuals to try to follow them. Some of them were pretty amazing. I mean, there is this one guy that actually, after he fled from Romania, he went to become the first president of the Senate of the Hawaii, and he tried to fight against the United States incorporation of Hawaii. Unfortunately, he did not succeed. Then he moved to the Philippines, he moved to Japan, where he did propaganda work amongst the Russian POWs, and he died in China somehow. And they are larger than life characters, some of them. Others are more local, more, let's say, Romanian. But they were, and then I realized that all these guys are connected somehow. And for me, it was, I mean, it was very hard to see why these guys are friends, why these guys are talking to each other. I mean, these anarchists, they are talking to physicians, they are talking to, and they have this amazing trajectories, personal trajectories. Some of them start as anarchists and then become members of the Senate, members of the parliament, members of the academy, very mainstream figures in Romanian culture and politics. And then I had this idea that actually I could look at this as kind of and I could understand their networking, their relations, their lives in a way, by looking at how these guys are connected with this very evasive and hybrid thing, which is the social. And I saw myself as kind of a fisherman trying to catch these guys through the nets of various theories and methodologies and trying to make sense of their amazing lives, and in a way try to make some very late justice regarding their total neglect in present day Romania.
Great, yeah, and so we've got this big concept, this big term, the social, and of course we don't want to take for granted. Like, what do you understand and mean by the social, especially for, I don't know, any viewers here who might not be in that field or coming from different disciplines? You know, it's this big, ambitious topic concept. You know, what were you working with and your understanding is the social, and how did that maybe differ from their understanding, or how that evolved or changed over time? Because you talk about the creation of it. Of course, it wasn't just one thing to, you know, one person or one thing to everyone. So I wonder if you could elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah, it's well, I'm talking about social expertise and social as the thematization of this new area of existence, of agency, of intervention by the state or by other institutions. That is this very hybrid part, very mutating object, which is this new expertise, new discourse about this reality that becomes represented, thematized, part of new networks of knowledge. So, well, obviously I'm influenced by various schools and guys and people who wrote about it. And it's not, well, totally new what I'm doing, but so my vision is a little, let's say, partially neo-Foucauldian, partially connected with what others wrote about. To put it simple, social as expertise, as a
well that
an object also of knowledge and of intervention in the same time, an object that you know, but you know, and you create and transform and work with it. And that's why I wrote that last part of the book, which is about how do Romania gets to be represented, which I think it's in line with the chapters I wrote before, because it's at the very first, it's very hard. I mean, it's very hard to imagine Romania, actually. And I'm trying to say that Romania is being, for the very first way of imagining Romania, it's a medical one, actually an epidemiological one. Everything starts with cholera. I think everything starts with this huge epidemic that swept over all Europe in the 19th century. And it starts with cholera in the way that Romania is or what was to be Romania, has to put quarantines on the borders. The quarantines are actually a very contradictory thing, because Romania also has to get enough money from corn and from selling enough corn, and there is a pressure to dismantle the quarantines. Then there is a pressure to create this, which I think is the very first internal space of knowledge, which is the medical space, the sanitary space in Romania, which is created by this pressure coming from the cholera, from the new, let's say, modernization, commercialization of Romania, who becomes a big exporter of corn. And also from this new knowledge that comes especially from Paris, Vienna, but also other parts of Europe, which is a knowledge that was created in order to cope with cholera, which is not only medical knowledge, but it's also statistical, managerial, ways of seeing people, this kind of new apparatuses of understanding the social as, I don't know, as connected with this new disease. So it's in my view, so Romania starts with cholera, and also, obviously there is also the Russian-Turkish war, but cholera is very important. And then there is, in 1848, the second step of the creation of this new Romania, whatever it is, it's the discussion about socialism, which it's everybody is from this new revolutionary wave of Romanians. They're trying to play a very interesting game with revolutionary discourses. They are saying, actually, we know what socialism is. We know that socialism is going to come. This is the future. And it's going to be just so that it comes. But we do not really want it for Romania. What we want for Romania is a modern structure that would keep together the Romanians as both citizens and producers, as a new way of dealing with property, especially agrarian property, and of creating a modern property out of the mix of traditional rights and things that were going on in Romanian, let's say, agriculture. And well, this discussion of, I mean, this tension between socialism, but not socialism for now, and we are not really socialist. And well, there is a great book text by Ion Ionescu de la Brad, Romanians Are Not Communists, which is, I think it's a very nice book. Unfortunately, it's not very well known in Romania. So there is this tension, and actually these guys are creating a position from themselves in the middle, outside the conservative boyars who do not understand what's going on, but also outside the frightening socialist revolution that might come. And they create a liberal middle ground when they have this socialist empty slot, empty thing. There are no real communists in Romania, and they are saying it so. But because of that, you can create a middle ground from where you can create this new modern Romania. You can represent this new modern Romania, and this representation is happening inside this new space that has been opened by cholera, where revolution and fake socialism comes. And this is, I would say, the beginning of modern Romania. So this is how my book starts. And well, it ends quite shortly after that. But
yeah, no, that's a great summary there. You know, I think so many of us, you and I included, you know, we focus so much on the 1920s and 30s and interwar Romania and all of this, but it's so nice to see how you can trace back these discourses on hygiene, identity, race, and kind of antedate so much of the work that we focus on, especially historians of Romania. But there's such a rich tapestry and knowledge that predates all of that, going well back into the 19th century, that we often take for granted. So, you know, this is a real major contribution to the scholarship, even going forward. And that's a nice segue to kind of my next question for you. You know, you've got such a rich theoretical and methodological framework here. I mean, you blend historical sociology, transnational history, biography, history of science, and biomedicine. And you mentioned it even just now, and I picked up on this phrase when I was reading your book. It might have been in the introduction, but your approach was kind of, I think you said, like a fishing net, right? Mm-hmm. To kind of cast out, you know, theoretically, methodologically, even in the characters you chose. I wonder if you can maybe talk a bit about this and discuss some of the, you know, major influences theoretically, methodologically on your research and writing that went into this book.
Yes, well, there are some, let's say, older influences. This kind of when I first read quite a few time ago Timothy Mitchell and Paul Rabinov, I was like, wow, this is something I want to do for Romania, like Rabinov does French modern for France, you know, something like this. It was very naive and very emotional thing. But and well, now I know that it cannot really be done. But that's what's actually started my thinking of this theoretically. And then I discovered a bunch of very strange neo-Foucauldians, like the last guys that were in Foucault seminar at Collège de France, like Robert Castel, Jacques Donzelot, François Delaporte, Giovanna Procacci, who wrote a lot about the social. They are not so very well known as other Foucauldians. They were connected with Rabinov somehow, and with Berkeley, because they were neither Marxists, so they could not really be recuperated inside leftist circles, but they were also nothing else. So I think they were kind of lost, and also because one of them became a very nasty public figure. He was a counselor of French patronate and against French syndicate movement, and so maybe that's why they had a bad publicity. But it's for me, I mean, they were very interesting, and especially François Delaporte and Jacques Donzelot, and because they were trying to understand the social in a way that I could really find congenial with my own interests. And so obviously there are also others like Mary Poovey or Bruce Curtis. And for me, through Rabinov and Delaporte especially, I could, because these guys were connecting all the discussion about the social with epidemics and medicine. And that's what kind of clicked for me. And because I could really see that cholera was so important for the Romanian society state, the Romanian social. And starting from there, I tried to connect these two things, this idea of social through socialism and this debates about the social and the medical part. And actually, that's probably the biggest bet of my book, that these things really stay together, and that they reinforce each other theoretically, methodologically, also as stories. And what makes me believe that this is so is that I have individuals, stories that I tell about individuals who are really crisscrossing these areas. And well, it's always, I mean, for me, it's always refreshing. And I think it has a theory is really good and working, I would say, if it can explain personal lives and trajectories. At least that's how I see it. And I think it does well. At least I hope so.
Yeah, great. A nice segue to kind of my next question for you. You know, you do have just an array of characters in this book. So, I mean, and like I said, in many ways, it's character driven. You know, if you just look at the introduction, the dramatis personae, it's just an amazing set, an eclectic set of individuals. I think in my review, I wrote, these are biographies of a motley crew of political and medical renegades alongside bacteria and other microorganisms as a kind of moving lens across Romania's Eastern geographical space. Talk a bit about why and how you chose these individuals in particular, who range from, I don't know, social revolutionaries or anarchists. For instance, Zamfir Arbore, physicians, anti-Semites, reformers, and then maybe some of the other characters that populate this book. I mean, diseases such as cholera. You know, you could maybe talk a bit about Arbore or somebody else you found interesting. And then, you know, you've gone back to cholera as well and why it was so important. And maybe talk a bit more about why and how you came to this conclusion of how important it was and had such ramifications.
Yeah, well,
and now they contributed as individual parts to this larger thing that produced, you know, the social in Romania, how they were all connected.
So, well, actually, some of these guys were connected in real life. They wrote letters to each other. They were friends. They took money from each other. They had stories together. Parts of them were because some of them were coming from Russia, and they had their bones to grind with the Russian Empire, and they found a kind of a more or less hospitable place here in Romania, who also had some bones to grind with the Russian Empire. And these guys were caught in, some of them I picked like this, I mean, they were friends actually, like Zamfir Arbore, or connected to this kind of revolutionary world web. Arbore, who is this amazing character who ran away from Russia because he was caught in the Nechayev conspiracy, and then he ran to Switzerland, obviously not to Romania, because he was not Romanian back then. He was Russian revolutionary, and then he became a very good friend with Bakunin, and then he fought with Bakunin. He became friends with some Ukrainian anarchists. Then he came to Romania in order to take care of the revolutionary books that were being smuggled into Russia. And then things happened, and in the end, he becomes one of the main figures on Romanian Freemasonry. He becomes the very first Romanian who is the head of the Statistical Bureau of Bucharest municipality. He becomes member of parliament. He becomes a professor of Russian and Bulgarian at Romanian War School before the Balkan Wars. But he's still a Russian revolutionary in his heart. And when the Potemkin ship comes to Constanța, he takes all the Potemkin sailors and let them sleep at his home and tries to find him jobs. And in one of his last books, his memoirs, he says, "I have no friends in Romania. All my friends are in Russia." I mean, this kind of very troubling characters. I mean, I found very interesting to follow and to try to understand and to try to think with, and how these guys could be all these things and still be coherent in a way. I mean, it's not only about. It could be about like personal ways of dealing with various moments in your life, but it's also something more here. And I think so these guys were I mean, he's friend with some other guy who is friend, this Nicolae Cudreanu, who is friend with with one of the very hardcore anarchists coming from Bessarabia, who is the very best friend of Constantini Strati, who Constantini Strati becomes after that member of the Conservative Party. And he becomes the writer of the very first, I think I argue in the book, the very first scientific racist and anti-Semite book in Romania. And he's connected with these guys, and these guys are totally different from this point of view, but there's still some coherence there, I think. And so in a way, these guys, I did not really like cherry pick them. They were like coming together at me. And then through cholera and this very nice bacteria that in a way created, I'm always willing to defend that cholera created modern Romania. This very nice bacteria, but very frightening at the same time. Through it, I got to write about Victor Babeș, who is one of my I mean, I like him very much in a way. I mean, I also dislike him, but this guy did not really know the other guys, but it's connected through them, I would say, through cholera and through Felix Jacob, who probably knew some of the anarchists. And it kind of makes sense when you try to follow them. And when you are relaxed enough to follow not just humans, but also bacteria, animals, diseases, to kind of see more agency in the world that it apparently is. And that's what I try to do. I probably left out a lot of people that might have been interesting, but it's a book, and I am a human, and I am lazy. And but I think that these guys, as they are, they stand together. I mean, they are not like, obviously there could be more, and I could have written more in depth about some of them, but well, that's how much I could do for the moment.
Yeah. So on that point too, I wonder if you could address, I don't know, maybe some criticisms or omissions in the book. It's always the book you wrote, not the book other people would have written themselves. That I think that always goes with the, understanding that with a review, a fair review anyway. But, something I noticed, among all these amazing characters, many of them were marginal and obscure anyway, but, there were no women, for instance. There were also, I think I read one review, that, there was an important event going on, and that's, Roma slavery, the abolition of slavery, that, briefly overlaps with the start of your book. So I wonder if maybe you could address some of that, and maybe even add some of your own criticisms of the book, now that you've had a year or so away from it, just your own reflection on, the state of your book and what you might have done differently from it.
Yeah, well, about the lack of women characters, you're totally right. And it dawned on me as I was finishing the book. And I think there is something, why I left them out. Obviously, they were not inside this network that was interacting, and these guys that were doing things. But obviously, there were women in the background. Some of them not really in the background, but also more clearly in. But I could have written about Sofia Nadezhda, even if it was not really that in that generation. But actually, these guys had very important women relatives, but I did not find any archival material. And I think that in order to do something really substantial, I needed some more archival material. So it's also some pragmatic reasons. Also because I'm lazy, as I already said, and I could have looked harder into that thing. But when I realized it, I was just about to finish the book, and I said, "Damn it! This is going to be." And I said that I would be happy to have this criticism just to people to read this book and have this criticism, I will totally accept it and be happy with it. So about the Roma, that's even more complicated. Yes, it's I thought a little bit about it, but it's I think it would have been too much for me. I mean, too much work to do it. I mean, I have to it's not that it should not have been done, but I'm not sure that I could have done it. I mean, it should have been another research. And after 2 years of writing the book and also having all my obsessions coming from the years before, I was really moving forward to finish it and be over with it and move to something else, hopefully. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all fair enough. Yeah, so I think we're approaching 30 minutes. I don't want to take too much time. I definitely want to leave some time for questions, but maybe just in wrapping up, I think this is a fantastic book, especially to assign, whether it's a graduate level course or an undergraduate course in any number of disciplines. It could be assigned on its own. I think individual chapters could be assigned as essays on, various topics. And I just think very highly of the book. I congratulate you, Călin, and thanks to JRS for commissioning the review. And Călin, if you have any last thoughts, wrapping up about the book, or maybe discuss what you're working on next and how working on this book and this topic has generated new ideas for your own work, or where you think maybe this approach to the book, whether it's thematically, structurally, or the way you've written it, could be applied to other topics and other areas.
Yes, well, it feels a very long time ago in a way, but actually what I've been trying to do is work a little bit more on the, let's say, medical part of it, because I think that there are interesting things that could still be discovered there and discussed, and all this idea of the history of this medical opening of Romania and the subsequent creation of the social by this medical opening of Romania can be, I think, pushed forward in time, and very interesting things happened during the World War I and during the interwar, especially with the entrance of big American foundations who are totally changing the landscape here. And there are also things happening with the new diseases, new medical research, and it's I'm tempted somehow to go into that direction. The direction of anarchism and anarchists, which I found amazing and extremely interesting. In order to go more in depth into these guys, I've written something about. I have one big problem. My Russian is very bad, and I have to know Russian and maybe even a little bit of Ukrainian to go into that direction. So that might be a dead end for me. But I do hope that somebody would do something more. I don't know, somebody who has a fair knowledge of Russian and an interest for this, I would say, amazing guys. I mean, really, it's, I totally enjoyed reading and writing about them. It was a great experience for me.
Great, thanks again, and congratulations, Călin.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Călin. So maybe we can open it up to some questions from those of you in the audience. I mean, any thoughts? Any criticism? Okay, so we have we have Stefan. Go ahead, please.
Hello. I was really interested in this book when it first appeared. Didn't manage to read it. I'll start with that because I didn't manage to order it yet. but I'm really curious about it, and that's the reason I'm at this presentation. I was wondering a lot, since we were working a lot with the literature of the 19th century, late 19th century and early 20th century, and there were a lot of, since peasants were the main class, the dominant class in Romania at the time, a lot of conservative socialists, liberal and so on, took stances on peasants and the rural economy of Romania. And what I found it intriguing is that most of the times the discourse of conservatives looks very much like the discourse of socialists, claiming some sort of I don't know, crushing inequality, raising up the peasantry. Of course, they have different methods in the epoch and different methodologies. But I was curious if you found this hard difference between those ideologies, because a lot of the times I think it's difficult, especially from somebody from the outside, to understand what were the political and social engagements in this respect to the peasantry. And I'm referring especially to Maiorescu, Ghera, and the other institutional thinkers, as we could call them.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. I think we can arrange something with the book if you want. I can send you a copy of it. Actually, I can tell you a story that probably makes my point. These two guys I've already mentioned, there's this Nicolae Zupu Codreanu and Constantin Istrati. They were both part of, I mean, Codreanu coming from Russia, from a Tchaikovsky circle, so very narodnik and anarchist. These things are overlapping at that moment. Comes to Bucharest, where he is part of this society of medical students, where Constantin Istrati is one of the founders. And they connect very, very well, tremendously. It's a mixture. I mean, Istrati does not become an anarchist, but he's interested in this discussion about the people. What happens to the people? And this Nicolae Codreanu writes a very interesting text, which he publishes in Obștina in Bakunin, in Zamfir Arbore's review in Geneva, which was an offshot of the Bakuninists, where he says that actually what happens in Romania in the real aftermath of the independence war, of the Russian-Turkish war, is that Romania is becoming modern in an institutional way, but its population, it's becoming, is degenerating in a biological way, biological, cultural, whatever. So this discourse of degeneration, which is being imported from Europe, and which is being used inside a very narodnik socialist discourse. Like you have this creation of independent Romania, you have this emergence of institutional modernity, which is being paid off by the sufferance of the people, which is a socialist, but could also be a conservative discourse, I think. And another thing which is very interesting that happens is that Istrati takes this discourse, which he considers like the real thing, and he says he says that Codreanu, without mentioning his name, is the only one who really cares about the peasants and who really understands what happens to the Romanian peasants. And then he switches and he connects this discourse with his own anti-Semitic discourse by saying that actually what's happening is that Jews coming to Romania and coming to cities are benefiting from Romania's new modernization, which is sanitary modernization mostly. They have more people, more children. They are growing, and the Romanian peasants who are paying for this live in misery and degradation and so on and so forth. So this guy Istrati takes this narodnik anarchist discourse, which has nothing to do with the Jews. I mean, they are totally philo-Semitic, and then I mean it's really no anti-Semitic thing at these guys, but he switches to his own template and he creates out of this, let's say, narodnik anarchist discourse plus some anti-Semitic demographics coming from Romanian physicians from Moldavia, he creates his own discourse where he explains what's wrong with Romania. And what's wrong with Romania is that we are degenerating as a race. Well, I'm not sure if I really answered you, but I think it's there is this very strange overlapping. And if you look at particular sometimes articulation between a socialist discourse and a very conservative one, which is strange, I mean, if you look from the outside. But if you really follow these guys, it makes sense, I think, somehow.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. Yeah, it reminds me of the Marxist quote, like the more intelligence you have, the more dumbness you have, the more intelligent your administration gets, the more idiotic and so on. So it's
well,
kind
yeah,
of
maybe, yeah, in a way, yeah. But it's fascinating to see how it's these things are coming from so different sources. I mean, it's like and also if we have time about this arbor, I was just talking with Chris that the very strange thing is that this Zamfir Arbore was one of the very first pro-Ukrainian Romanians, I think, that wrote something about this, because he started as a pro-Ukrainian anarchist in Geneva with Dragomanov, where they fought for this great Slav revolution, where peripheral people would be central, like Ukrainians, people from the Caucasus, Bulgarians, even some Romanians or Moldavians. And then when he came to Romania and when he became a part of the Romanian state, he had a pro-Ukrainian discourse by saying that Ukraine should, geopolitically speaking, we should help Ukraine, not because they are revolutionary, as it was in a couple of years before, he was saying a couple of years before that, but because they are a buffer against the Russian Empire. So it's all kinds of crazy mixtures, and I think it's what makes it this kind of history and this kind of theoretical history, I would say, so fascinating.
Okay, thank you. I think this is probably a good point to end our meeting tonight, especially coming full circle, right, to our present conflict, right? So that's always interesting to actually trace back histories. But moving forward, I also want to announce we will have another book talk scheduled for May. So thank you all for participating. I hope you learned a lot from tonight's discussion, and hopefully you can actually finally read the book or get copies of the book, right? In an anarchist manner, right? We can actually spread the word.
Anyone who wants a copy of the book, I mean, just please don't spread the news. Just write me in private an email, and I will send you a copy. Okay, a PDF, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Călin. Thank you, Chris. Thank you all. Have a good night, and hope to keep in touch. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.